Hi everybody, I'm Bree the Plant Lady, and today I wanted to continue doing an in-depth tour right here from my Zone 7 Central North Carolina garden. And I thought that I would start here at a plant that is near and dear to my heart because it may be a tree that not everyone is super familiar with, and it's at its bark exfoliating stage right now. And I think it looks really cool. So let me turn this camera around and give you an up-close view of this awesome crepe myrtle, also known as Lagerstroemia varii fantasy. First of all, it's cute to see a little kitten pounce around. He loves Carex. So here we have my fantasy crepe myrtle, which is actually its cultivar name. I'm not making that up. And this is a plant that was seed grown. I believe the story is J.C. Ralston from NC State, who the Arboretum is named for, grew this out from seed and made two selections, Townhouse and Fantasy. And they are both growing at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. Like they're like really incredible trees, the originals. And I actually propagated this via cuttings from the original plant. I gathered these cuttings in probably May of 2011 or maybe 2010, and it's been planted here, I guess, since maybe winter of 2011. I planted this as a 2-quart pot. And you can see, I do not believe in crepe murder. No reason to cut your crepe myrtles down. That defeats the purpose of growing them. And this species, Lagerstroemia varii, is meant to be like a really huge plant, like 120 foot tall. It has amazing exfoliating bark, which you can see here as it's starting to caliper. The bark just falls right off. And this incredible cinnamon coloration. Now, Lagerstroemia varii is half of the species of the common crepe myrtles that you see planted all over the southeast. So those are Lagerstroemia indica by varii. And so if you're familiar with a really famous white variety called Natchez, that's precisely that hybrid. It's half indica, half varii. The reason that it has kind of a nice sort of shape, Natchez has a really nice shape and really good exfoliating bark, is because of the varii influence. So there's a little plant nerd information about crepe myrtles, which I think most people in the South take for granted. Of course, these are Asian native. They're just really well suited for the conditions of the Southeast. So what's happening at the base of this garden? Well, nothing really very good. This bed is one space where I've learned I actually raised it a little bit too much. You can see it's mounded and it dries out really fast, likely because of the influence of this crepe myrtle. Also, right across the way, there is a very thirsty water oak whose roots are absolutely penetrating this bed. And I've had a really difficult time getting perennial plants established here. I originally wanted this to be a perennial border, and most of the plants have dried up and died. What you're seeing here are Lunaria, a biennial that is self-sown in mass, but struggling because of the dryness. I've got some strawberries, some Veronica that has persisted, but you can see just doesn't look as good as it could. I really need to just fill this bed up with salvia. So here is Salvia farinacea, and right there is one of the only Salvia leucanthas that hasn't died on my property because of it being too wet. So obviously the plants are telling me who wants to live here and who doesn't, and I haven't been listening. I need to put more salvias in this bed and just let it be. Well, you can see the south side of the house foundation is full and, you know, doing its thing. I'm kind of at the stage where I'm going to be cutting down a lot of the tiger lilies. which, you know, were beautiful in the summer when they were flowering, but are starting to go yellow. So I just simply cut those to the ground, and I try not to drop every single bauble because that's actually how they perpetuate. Across the way, I think the arch was better last year, but every year is different. And this year I did not plant sweet potatoes here. I let the castor beans, the self-sown castor beans go, and the black-eyed Susan vine, which is just one of those plants that once you've planted it, you'll never not have it. I've just sort of let that happen, and I'm not displeased with it, but I think it did look cooler last year when it was covered in the Treasure Island sweet potatoes. So as we make our way down this side property border, this was one of the very last beds to get planted, and I have got to say it is looking great in my opinion. Not getting this planted so early means that it'll look good for the entire fall season. And that's one of the things that southeastern gardeners have to take into consideration, but we haven't been trained very well to do. And so it's certainly been a focus of mine, kind of reconfiguring ideal planting dates based off of when you actually want the bed to look good. Because if I had planted this in May, it wouldn't look good for the fall open garden in September. So this didn't get planted until the middle of July, but look at it. You know, the Scufia is doing its thing, the buckwheat, the direct seeded cosmos, of course the queen lime orange zinnias are in full bloom. The okra is really starting to get some height. That would have been taller if I'd done a better job preventing the deer from getting in here and eating. I did have a deer path in here, and so last week I ran to a garden center and just picked up some marigolds to fill in here, and that's definitely helping along with the Orbit Yard Enforcer to prevent the deer from nibbling all of this. I've got to get that reset up before I go out of town tomorrow. I'm hoping that I will still be able to harvest some okra before the season's over. It's my favorite summer vegetable, and I have not had any yet from my own garden, which is really quite absurd. I do love the texture of the okra leaf. It's so tropical and beautiful. And with that, having the Edgeworthia behind there, and really this bed behind this area, which is really a very shady space because I overplanted trees and shrubs. Overall, I'm really pleased with how this border has come out. And though I was quite concerned because we did plant it so late, it's a really important lesson to have in my memory bank that mid-July is not too late for getting beds planted to look great for the fall. Now, because I love self-sowing plants, I've perpetuated quite a lot of that here. I'm really amazed at all of the Nigella, which of course blooms in May. I can't believe how much of it has already germinated. And it should make it fine, I think, over the winter, unless we get exceptionally cold. Ordinarily, this doesn't germinate this early in the season, but here we are. So I don't think I've really shown this section of the border in my normal garden tours, and I really wanted to show you this succulent, a hardy succulent that's a little bit invasive called Talinum calicinum. And I love it. I love the little pink wispy flowers. Every flower will set seed, every seed will germinate, so perhaps be warned about that. It's not impossible to manage, and I like it in this place because this is a really shady nook that's less and less practical for me to grow traditional things in. So the fact that the Talinum just kind of fills in and has those airy sprays of blooms, I think is actually quite charming. I also really like it next to the pink flowering buckwheat. And this is something that I got the seed from Baker Creek heirloom seed. And this again was sown the middle of July, and it's starting to flower now. We have it on both sides of this walkway, and you can see it's just got a great sort of fill in the gaps kind of habit. Next to that is some dark seeded sesame. If you watched the video out front, you saw white seeded sesame, traditional sesame. This is the dark seeded sesame, and actually just ate Indian food last night. They had dark seeded sesame embedded in the naan, which gave a really great, crunch and flavor. And so that's something I maybe will try and experiment with. Just like the white seeded sesame, the dark seeded will, form seed pods. These won't be ripe for another couple of months. I usually wait until, we get frost. These are frost sensitive. So the foliage is gonna fall off when it gets cold, and then it makes it really easy to just cut the stalk down at the base and then tip the entire plant over into a wheelbarrow. And that's how I actually collect all that seed. I'm definitely pleased to see lots of flowers coming on the okra. I will end up getting something to harvest. And next to here is the lemon verbena. Which it just smells like lemon pledge, and that just reminds me of happiness. I can't help myself. Of course, one of my favorite zinnias ever, frankly, of any new variety, is the Queen Lime series. And here's one that isn't completely double, but that coloration is so beautiful. But let me show you this plant of Queen Lime Orange, because it's basically exactly what the seed packet promises. It's so beautiful. I mean, look at that. And here, obviously I have not cut any of these because I would like to get seed, but these are zinnias that I also buy the seed every single year from various sources, including Park, Baker Creek, Johnny's. If you haven't grown the Queen Lime Zinnia series, you need to look it up immediately. It really is a game changer in the zinnia world. And again, because these were sown in the middle of July, notice how clean the foliage still is. There's very few spots of anthracnose, and there's very little powdery mildew. And that has everything to do with the timing of getting this planted. It's funny, I set personal goals for myself every year, and this year my goal or big experiment in the garden was to plant things in untraditional time schedules, because I think there's a lot to be learned. And no, this doesn't equate to people in zone 5, okay? I don't live in zone 5. I grew up in zone 5. I moved to zone 7 on purpose. But there's a lot of zone 5 conventional information that gets applied here that isn't necessarily best practices. And it's my goal as a gardener in the Southeast to question those norms and see if there are better solutions to combat disease or pests, or simply make your garden look good for a longer period of time. And I have to say, even though I constantly question myself, I think there is something to be said for this altered planting season. So, I've really stretched the limits with doing my spring plantings, and I don't harvest those things until like the middle of June. So there's no way I'm getting any of these beds planted in May, when conventional wisdom drives you to the garden center and says you have to buy everything by Mother's Day. In zone 7, you absolutely do not need to be doing that. Frankly, I don't think you need to be doing that in colder regions either, but I'm gonna hold my opinions back until I have better information to share. But for here, I really think that there is something to be said about actually planting on the calendar schedule for seasons. Summer does not start in May. I know it feels like it does, but it doesn't. Summer starts on June 21st. And this year, my goal was to have everything planted by the 4th of July. I missed that because I got COVID. However, my mid-July plantings are not letting me down. Had I done this in May, this garden wouldn't look this good. There would be powdery mildew, there would be diseases, there would be holes from where plants had to get pulled out. So definitely going to continue on this path of really looking and thinking very critically about timing of plantings so that people in the Southeast have a little varied information to be able to access, so that we're not all in a race to get everything done by May 15th. Because I'm here to prove to you that you don't have to do that. You can wait. You can actually enjoy the process of gardening, and instead of it being a race to the finish line, you can just make it something that you get to do in little bits in a really enjoyable time frame and do it on your terms. Can I say, I want gardening to be a hobby that everyone picks up, and if it feels like work, well, I'm not going to achieve that goal. So on that note, I'm going to end this little micro garden tour, and I hope that you will tune in tomorrow for the next half of my back garden, where hopefully I will get to share some inspiration and words of wisdom. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.